Welcome everyone to another edition of the RetireWise podcast. I'm David Coster with Retirement Living Associates. I'm pleased today to be joined by David Segmiller with JMT Architecture. I've known David for quite a while, and he is one of the legends in the design field within senior living, and thought it would be a great opportunity here at the Leading Age of North Carolina Conference to sort of do a check-in and talk about how things have changed, what's coming in senior living, how that impacts the design of spaces and communities, and how we're going to deal with the baby boom that is upon us in senior living. This podcast is designed to help just a normal person who's considering senior living, either for themselves or for a family member, just to understand the industry a little bit better, how things sort of are structured, and maybe some things that will help them as they go through the process of evaluating senior living for themselves or for a loved one. So welcome.
Thanks.
Appreciate you being here. Give us a little bit of a bio, just a little bit of a background.
Sure. I've been an architect for about 40 years. The first few years of my career, I actually worked in kind of commercial work, did a lot of mixed use, big urban mixed use projects, and kind of had a passion for site planning and mixing different things, and got introduced to, at the time, CCRCs, now life plan communities. And that was really, back then, those were big new things. And I was living in Maryland, so Pennsylvania was kind of where everything started. So it was really in the mid-Atlantic and Virginia that it was like the hotbed then. And so there was a lot of work. And I was used to kind of being on the road doing that. So built a practice. And then about 20 years ago, moved to Charlotte. And have been doing the same thing in Charlotte. Like most architects in this industry, I came mostly from the not-for-profit side. So it's this group that we have here that's the North Carolina not-for-profit group. But I have been involved on the for-profit side too, with things like the Urban Land Institute, where I got to lead and create really the council for senior housing, which Dave Ammons was on with me. And so I've been exposed to the whole industry for the last 40 years, and I've been a speaker at a lot of these conferences and things like that.
So what would you say are the biggest changes that have occurred in the design of senior living spaces and communities over your career? And I know we're on the brink of the baby boom really impacting this industry, but let's focus on what has changed since you started up until now.
Oh gosh, it's been lots, right? I always found that the for-profits would say, "Oh, we're the innovators," and I would say you're wrong, because I saw a lot more innovation on the not-for-profit side over the years. When I first got into this business, we didn't even have anything called assisted living on most of our projects. Right. That product didn't exist, and it got created. Sunrise, and people brought that to the forefront, but then everybody was like, "Wow, we kind of need this middle ground," and so it became a popular wave to kind of create that on existing campuses, and now it's like everybody takes it for granted that it's part of the continuum, right? And the same thing with memory care. That used to be just dealt with in the nursing home, which wasn't a great place for it, and we all kind of realized that residents stayed healthier but mentally frail for a long period of time, and you had to accommodate that in a different environment than a nursing environment or even an AL environment. And so so now the continuum got bigger.
Right. Well, let me ask you a follow-up on the memory care specifically, because it's one of the things that when I have conversations with people, they really don't understand what memory care is.
Sure.
But it's as much a dedicated space as it is a separate programming approach. So what would you say as it relates to that from a memory care point of view?
Well, it's interesting because not everybody separates it, right? I mean, I find as an architect working with clients that it's hard to be so arrogant to say, I know everything about what you want to do, because everybody provides care and structures their care in a different way. And some of them do not separate memory care from the rest of the residents, but they have ways to deal with that. Memory care, it's somebody that has Alzheimer's and early stage dementia, and there's all kinds of different clinical sort of definitions of that we don't really get into, but it's trying to provide an environment where residents can be safe, but still experience a quality of life every day that has access to outdoor space, has access to meals. It tends to not want to be too structured because they don't, their brains don't work in a structured way anymore, and so I find the best ones are really the ones that let people eat when they want to eat and do what they want to do when they want to do it. And it's usually in small groups,
Right.
10 or 12 people is about max that you can handle with a couple of staff on a daily, a couple daily shifts. But
Right.
It's spawned all kinds of different ways to do it. And the hard part, I think, too, as people now live longer, right? Which is great, right?
Sure.
But now you're seeing couples that live in communities that one person needs that care,
Right.
and the other one doesn't. So how do you solve that, right? The other person has been the caregiver and needs a respite, right? Needs a way to, be able to live a life too. And how do you accommodate that in a building, right? It's not an easy answer, and people are trying to do all kinds of different ways to accommodate that. I don't know that we've solved it yet. Right?
Yeah, and I think you're highlighting something that the industry, I would say proudly, when there's a problem that needs to be addressed, the industry tries to find a way. And everybody that's involved, the folks like you, other vendors that provide services, everybody's trying to solve the problems that present themselves. And you just identified one that, how often, much more often now, you've got a couple and one needs care and one doesn't, or one needs a much higher level of care than,
or they
than
both
the other.
need it.
Or they both need it.
And
what does that do to a space, right?
Right. And there's all kinds of levels of Alzheimer's care. Some places have multiple levels, right? And I've actually been with an executive director here, he's here, I saw him, where his mother was in one level of Alzheimer's care and his father was in another one, and they all were in his community. And I was like, wow, this is kind of crazy. You're here every day and you see your parents every day, but in the memory care unit. And he goes, yeah, but I know that they're getting great care. I get to see them.
Right.
He had brought them down from Maryland, where we both knew each other originally. Tom Smith, he's here.
Yeah.
It was just amazing to me that he could make that work.
Yeah. I mean, it's about preserving dignity. It's about increasing the lifespan, as they call it, the health span, so that the quality of life is there for folks. And I think that's one thing the industry and all those that are involved in it can be very proud of, is identifying those problems and then working as hard as possible to solve them.
And I think the nonprofit side's much more flexible at trying to figure that out.
Right.
Mostly because they're in a different situation than a for-profit standalone that does one thing really good. But you can't, once you can age out of those places, or you can, and then what do you do? It's like a constant problem for the family to figure out what to do next.
So let's talk a little bit about the baby boom and what's coming. Obviously,
it's here.
It's here. You're right. Turning 80, the oldest baby boomers turning 80 in this next year. Unprecedented demand. There's been a dearth of development over the last several years from COVID and beyond. And so there's not nearly enough spaces. So what does that present for the industry? Are we looking at conversions of other spaces? What would you say to that?
I'd say we're way behind, and we need to. I think as a industry, we need to figure out a way to address it, right? I mean, the market's going to be huge, and it already is becoming huge. You've got that. You always had those people that are never leaving their house, right? And those are the people that mostly go to the for-profit world, or they'll end up at a standalone assisted living or something like that. But the people who plan, the people who figure out, and want to have a certain lifestyle, they go to the retirement community, the life plan community. So there's, I think, an overriding need to keep building and to keep creating more space in order to serve all those people. It's a huge generation of people. It's always driven the U.S. economy. You read that book, Generations, but it's I don't think we're keeping up, right? I do a lot of repositioning with retirement communities.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that.
Where we and I had a unique experience last week I'll tell you about, but where we go in and we say, what do you want to do? What do you need to do? How are you going to afford to do it? What's that look like? I like to do that with somebody like CLA and have Mario in the room, and then during the charrette when we're there, work together to solve the problems and come in with some ideas that financially fit their model and will cover their key financial indicators. And so then you're kind of constantly growing, and I think that's because of the economy, because of COVID and the supply chain and all that. We're way behind, and we need to be thinking, I think any retirement community, even if it's landlocked, needs to constantly kind of grow.
Right.
It used to be that you could reposition every 8 to 10 years. I think you really almost shouldn't stop because the market is getting more and more crowded with competition.
So would you say for someone who's looking at senior living, looking at a life plan community for the first time, or you're just getting involved, that's a question perhaps they should be asking the communities? It seems to me. What are your plans for the future?
And what are you going to? What's today, but what's 5 and 10 years out look like?
Right.
Because they're going to probably, I heard a statistic a long time ago. The average stay in a CCRC was like 7 years or something. I don't know how true that is today.
I would say think probably longer.
Yeah, that's what I think. Is that it's longer today, and that it's going to continue to get longer because the boomers are going to live longer lives, and the rest of the generation's the same thing. But so how are you going to serve all those people? We've always demographically just served a sliver of that market, of the senior market.
Right.
But the market's getting so big, that sliver gets bigger and bigger.
That's right. And I mean, those statistics are somewhere between 7 and 13%
right.
Of the population that is being served by existing CCRCs or life plan communities. And obviously without growth, it really can't advance beyond that. In fact, it'll probably drop unless the supply dramatically increases. Thank you, David Segmiller. I appreciate your time.
Anytime.
And thank you for listening to Retire Wise. You can find us on YouTube.